This morning, we are honoring the life of President Jimmy Carter, who's being remembered after his death on Sunday at 100 years old. ABC's Morgan Norwood brings us a look at the latest reactions pouring in as the country mourns its longest-lived president.
Tributes are pouring in to honor former President Jimmy Carter.
We may never see his like again. We'd all do well to try to be a little more like Jimmy Carter.
In his address to the nation Sunday, President Biden remembering Carter, who was 100 years old, as the longest living president in U.S. history. Biden and Carter sharing a friendship that spanned nearly 50 years.
Millions of people all around the world, all over the world, feel they lost a friend as well, even though they never met him. And that's because Jimmy Carter lived a life measured not by words, but by his deeds.
President-elect Trump writing that Carter taught all of us he did everything in his power to improve the lives of all Americans. For that, we all owe him a debt of gratitude. Former President Barack Obama stating Carter taught all of us what it means to live a life of grace, dignity, justice, and service. And from former President George W. Bush, Carter was loyal to his family, his community, and his country. And the Clintons. He worked tirelessly for a better, fairer world. Carter's one term in office was defined by foreign policy. He brokered a historic peace deal between Israel and Egypt, which is still in effect. But an energy crisis in the U.S. and the kidnapping of 52 American hostages in Iran played a role in his political undoing. Carter was just 56 when he left the White House. But in the more than 40 years since then, Carter and his wife Rosalind devoted themselves to humanitarian pursuits, both in the U.S. and around the world, with the former president winning the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002 in recognition of those efforts.
When historians write the paragraph on Jimmy Carter 100 years from now, what do you want to be at the top of the list?
I'd say maybe peace and human rights. I kept the country at peace for 4 years and promoted peace for other people.
And President Biden ordering a state funeral at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. next Thursday. Carter will be laid to rest in his native Plains, Georgia. Morgan Norwood, ABC News, Atlanta.
In a social media post, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says, in part, quote, President Jimmy Carter truly exemplified what it meant to live a life full of service. His towering legacy of compassion for others set a standard that will always be remembered. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds says, in part, quote, President Carter lived a great life marked by service to his country, volunteering his time to build homes for those in need well into his 90s. President Carter never stopped living his faith through service. Reynolds' statement is referring to Carter's well-known philanthropic work after his time in the White House. That includes more than 35 years of volunteer service with Habitat for Humanity, diplomatic work on behalf of the U.S. government, and the creation of the Carter Center in Atlanta, a partnership with Emory University. The center is committed to human rights and alleviation of human suffering. They seek to prevent and resolve conflicts, enhance freedom and democracy, and improve health outcomes. Now, Carter's legacy extends to right here in the Quad Cities. News 8's Shelby Kluver takes a look back on one of the president's trips to the QCA.
President Jimmy Carter served in the role from 1977 to 1981. Over his presidency, Carter made several stops to the Quad Cities region, including Davenport, where thousands flocked to the riverfront in August 1979.
We're really excited coming back to Davenport, and thank all of you for coming out to welcome us. This last 3 days have been very exciting for me and for Amy and for Rosalind. To see the beautiful Midwest, to enjoy the Mississippi, and above all, to see the wonderful people that have made us feel so welcome.
There was also a trip to Moline, where he visited John Deere headquarters. Carter, the son of a farmer himself, learning about the latest in agriculture technology. Some Quad citizens were also able to speak one-on-one with the president by calling into a local radio station.
Yeah, we'd like to know, how do you like Davenport?
At one point, he was met with a protest for a portion of his trip.
Members of Acorn were waiting to challenge Carter on the lack of corporate taxation.
The president smiled and shook hands with friendlier bystanders. In 2002, the president was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his work to bring peace to international conflicts, instilling American ideals in foreign nations. In the president's farewell address to the nation in 1981, he said, "Our American values are not luxuries, but necessities. Not the salt in our bread, but the bread itself."
Thank you very much. God bless you.
Shelby Kluver, WQAD News 8.
And President Biden has called for flags at half-staff for 30 days. He's also marking January 9th as a national day of mourning after Carter's passing. Carter's casket will travel to Atlanta, where it will lie in repose at the Carter Center. Then he will be flown to Washington, D.C. to lie at the Lion State at the U.S. Capitol. After his state funeral, he will be taken back to Plains, where he will be buried alongside Rosalind following a private service. And just hours after the announcement of Carter's death, President Joe Biden addressed the nation, calling Carter an extraordinary leader, statesman, and humanitarian, saying in part, quote, "He lifted the people up and changed lives and saved lives all over the globe." Meanwhile, President-elect Donald Trump sharing his condolences on Truth Social, saying Carter did everything in his power to improve the lives of all Americans, and for that, we owe him a debt of gratitude.